Good afternoon and welcome to members of the media and the people of Bermuda who may be watching. I'm joined here this afternoon by the Minister of Youth, Social Development and Seniors, the Honorable Tinee Furbert. On Friday, the 8th of November, Her Excellency the Governor delivered the speech from the throne entitled A Fairer Bermuda for All. It was a message and occasion of empowerment and hope, though tempered by sadness as you remembered a dedicated legislator, Senator Leslie Robinson, who is no longer with us. The theme, A Fair Bermuda for All, embodies this government's commitment to putting fairness and equity at the core of our work, ensuring that our policies and services meet the needs of Bermudians. Building a fair Bermuda isn't a new mission for this government. It is a continuation of our efforts since we took office, which has delivered meaningful change, and we will continue to do so. Over the past few years, this government has helped make Bermuda fairer by reducing payroll taxes for 86% of workers, implementing Bermuda's first minimum wage, expanding child care assistance for families, increasing affordable housing options, making housing more attainable for Bermudians through the Mortgage Guarantee Program, and eliminating stamp duty on mortgage transfers. Today, I will outline the initiatives led by the Ministry of Finance, highlighting the government's recognition that for Bermuda to be truly fair, we must address disparities in financial access, affordability, and opportunity by implementing policies and legislation that ensure that Bermudians are treated fairly and that costs are reduced in essential services such as banking and pensions. Firstly, we will address inequalities in Bermuda's banking sector, where many residents face barriers to basic banking services. Under amendments to the Banks and Deposits Company Act, banks will be required to provide basic banking services to all residents. Every Bermudian deserves access to fundamental financial tools, a bank account, a debit card, or online payments, without excessive hurdles or costs. However, this is not the case now, and a growing number of residents do not have access to basic banking services. Ensuring that Bermuda is more fair means ensuring that Bermudians can participate in the financial system. Additionally, we are advancing regulations that will cap bank fees. For too long, banks have reported bumper profits while Bermudians pay the price. This government will ensure that financial services are fair, accessible, and responsive to the needs of our people. And I'll just go off script for a second to just note that I received a message earlier today from a concerned resident who said they had received a check and their bank had charged them $40 to deposit that check. Fairness in financial services goes beyond banking. Since 1998, Bermudian workers have paid an estimated $500 million in fees to local pension administrators. A review has found that these fees are higher than in many other jurisdictions. This government is committed to ensuring that Bermudians' hard-earned money stays with them, so we will introduce regulations to cap fees paid to pension administrators. These changes will mean that a Bermudian entering the workforce today can have an additional $75,000 in their pension account by retirement. And we want to ensure that all Bermudians can look forward to retirement without undue financial strain and to have larger balances when they retire to support them as they are living longer. The government will also launch a financial literacy campaign to empower Bermudians to make informed financial decisions. This exercise is informed by some of our fellow CARICOM countries who have undertaken similar exercises. The Ministry of Finance will first conduct a financial literacy survey, followed by targeted initiatives in partnership with pension administrators. Financial literacy is the foundation of financial empowerment, and we want every Bermudian to have the knowledge and skills they need to manage their finances confidently. The government will also ensure fairness and financial prudence are our focus as we implement the new corporate income tax, which will be effective on the 1st of January 2025. During this upcoming legislative year, the government will codify how corporate income tax revenues will be reserved for Bermuda's benefit to eliminate Bermuda's national debt over time and establish a sovereign wealth fund. This fund will enable strategic investments in Bermuda's future, ensuring that revenue generated from our corporate sector benefits Bermudians now and in future generations to strengthen our economy. Our efforts to build fairness in the tax system extend to Bermuda's small business owners as well. A new payroll tax system for the public service vehicle industry will be introduced, establishing fixed payroll levels based on minibus seating capacity. Additionally, payroll tax for taxi owners is going to be reduced from $100 to $1,000 to $600, which is a 40% reduction. As part of our commitment to a fair tax structure that supports small business owners while enabling them to provide essential service to the public. To create a fairer marketplace, we will address the concerning trend of consolidation in key sectors, including food supply and financial services. When few players control essential goods and services, Bermudians may suffer from reduced choices and higher costs. This government will introduce legislative amendments allowing us to scrutinize and, if necessary, act on local mergers and acquisitions that could harm competition and drive up prices. It is a fact that the government currently lacks the legislative tools to address these matters. Therefore, we must implement checks and balances to ensure that Bermudian consumers are protected, prioritizing fairness and transparency in these transactions. Beyond the financial initiatives that I've discussed, this year's throne speech announced detailed plans throughout government ministries that will contribute to a fairer Bermuda. Over the coming days, government ministers will hold press conferences and other events to delve into specific initiatives from the throne speech that will be led by their ministries and aligned with our shared mission of fairness. What was clear from the financial reforms to housing initiatives, enhancements to our education system, the reduction of red tape, expansion of healthcare coverage, addressing homelessness, and more that you will hear about from ministers, this government is focused on building a fairer Bermuda for all. Fairness is the guiding principle behind every decision, policy, and action we take, and we look forward to continuing to deliver on that during this legislative year. I will now invite the Minister of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors to share details on the throne speech initiatives being led by her important and vital ministry. Minister.
Thank you, Bermuda. Good day, Bermuda. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I want to share the initiatives of the Ministry of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors designed to foster a fairer, more equitable Bermuda as outlined in the throne speech initiatives for 2024. A Bermuda where no member of our community is left behind and every voice is heard and valued. The role of the Ministry of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors is to safeguard Bermuda's most vulnerable populations. These include our young people, our elderly, persons with disabilities, and families facing hardship. Today, I want to speak to each of you about how we will improve the social support, strengthen protections, and uphold the dignity of every individual across our community. This year, the Bermuda took a historic step, becoming the first overseas territory to extend the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This initiative sets a strong foundation for us to advance our own Disabilities Act, an essential framework that ensures persons with disabilities are granted equal rights and access. The new act will be a powerful tool to protect and empower individuals with disabilities, providing them with access to services, facilities, and employment they deserve. In April, the launch of Bermuda's first national disability register began the critical work of identifying the needs of persons with disabilities across our island. This positions us to identify and address the gaps in available programs, services, and necessary equipment. A Disability Act will be the next step in this journey, which is long overdue and urgently needed. I want to acknowledge all those living with disabilities who have reached out to me, including those who visited me at the polling station back in 2017 when I first ran for Parliament. Your trust in this government to advance legislation on your behalf is both heard and deeply valued. Many of our financial assistance clients in rest and nursing homes face an unspoken but pressing issue. They struggle to afford basic hygiene products and personal care items. We know that dignity in care isn't a privilege, it is necessary. That's why we're amending the financial assistance regulations to include a $100 monthly personal allowance. This addition will help seniors and persons with disabilities in care facilities maintain self-integrity and meet their daily needs. With a small community such as ours, families sit at the heart of Bermuda. They are the foundation of our society, and we must ensure that they have the support needed to thrive. Unfortunately, many families are grappling with financial hardship, housing insecurity, and gaps in basic life skills. Our new intensive family preservation program will take a cross-ministry team approach to provide hands-on support to high-risk families. This program will equip families with the tools to manage daily responsibilities like budgeting, meal planning, and effective communication to build stable parenting and nurturing environments for our children. This program has proven to be effective to our families and community. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This ancient wisdom reminds us that we cannot build a thriving Bermuda without supporting the families who make up our communities. When our families are strong, our society is strong. By intervening directly, we are breaking cycles of hardship and empowering families to move forward with hope, resilience, and independence. I also want to remind the public that the personal allowance for seniors and persons with disabilities and the intensive family preservation program were initiatives funded by the mid-year budget review. We are certain that these initiatives will deliver a meaningful difference in the lives of Bermudians. Every person deserves a safe place to call home. We recognize that housing insecurity is a complex issue affecting far too many Bermudians. To address this, the government has finalized a plan to end homelessness, which will soon be presented to the legislature. This plan is not just a policy, it is a commitment to ensure every Bermudian has access to stable housing. This requires all of us, government, and the community alike, to work to bring about lasting change. In these times, the government must be proactive and connected to the real struggles of Bermudians. We have not lost sight of your challenges, and we are working to address them head on. From securing housing to ensuring our elderly and children are protected, this government is committed to the well-being of every Bermudian. Our role is to lead, to coordinate, and to monitor progress, but we also need the community's engagement. This legislative session is about lifting Bermuda's most vulnerable, empowering families, and building a future where everyone can thrive. These initiatives are not just policies. They're holding us accountable to you, the people of Bermuda. And I'm here to ensure that these accountabilities are not just words, but are real, measurable changes that reach every corner of our island. Let us continue this journey together, grounded in the values of dignity, equality, and opportunity for all. Together, we will build a Bermuda that is fairer, more inclusive, and more resilient, where there is no one left behind, and every member of our community has a place to be heard and respected. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Premier. The Minister and the Premier have outlined some significant initiatives as part of the legislative agenda. We're going to open it up for
Mr. Furbert. I guess if I can start with Premier Burt regarding the banking services. I'm sure that'll be on a lot of people's mind. So this is a repeated throne speech from last year to ensure all residents have access to banking services. The Bankers Association CEO Jeff Scott said we must determine exactly who needs these provisions so that risk can be determined. At that time, they said they only had anecdotal numbers. Do you have an approximate number of people that need banking services that are unavailable to them right now?
So has the government done a survey on that? No. What I can say from the Ministry of Finance's perspective is that persons who have this difficulty either come directly to the Ministry of Finance or come to us via their members of Parliament, whether canvassing or otherwise, and have found this. But I want to touch on this issue regarding a repeated pledge because I think it's important. The throne speech will lay out the policy and the intended items that are expected to be done in a particular legislative session. Under matters that are related to banking, as it is a regulated sector, there is a requirement for consultation to take place with the Bermuda Monetary Authority and the affected banks. That consultation has happened. The Bermuda Monetary Authority has presented a particular plan forward. The Ministry of Finance has considered those particular matters, is going back to respond to Bermuda's Monetary Authority regarding our views and thoughts, and then legislation needs to be drafted up, regulations need to be drafted up, and things need to be advanced. So I will accept the perspective that you said this was a mention in last year's throne speech, but I think it's important that people understand the legislative process. It is not a magic wand. We need to make sure we follow it. But that particular pledge last year, it's something we wanted to achieve in this particular last session. It was not, but it is not changed. We have done the consultation. Work has advanced. It's expected that we'll be able to table those bills this year.
Do you have I guess just to get a sense of the scope of the issue, do you have an estimate of how many people are currently unbanked that would like to?
I don't have an estimate. As I said, we haven't gone out and asked. What we do know is that this is an issue that is affecting more persons. And it is a particular challenge, which has a lot of it is dealing with anti-money laundering requirements and other things which are imposed upon banks. But what even the global financial bodies have found is that the regulations which are in place are actually leading to more persons being unbanked, which is the exact opposite of what was being tried to achieve. It was reduction of financial crime, not to reduce persons who are unbanked. So the global standard settings bodies are now looking at including financial inclusivity as part of these things. And it's important that we recognize that some of these provisions are actually leading to persons not being able to be banked. And just look at the perspective. It is very simple. If you want to travel, you would find it very hard to travel if you do not have a bank account, if you don't have a debit card, if you can't make online payments, those type of items. And so it is something that we've seen happen in other jurisdictions. And the space that this government has always been in is that we want to make sure that people have fair access. And so if there's a need for us to change the law to ensure that Bermudians have fair access, then we will do that.
At this stage, are you aware
that may be proposed?
I think that the government has always struck a very good balance. The team of the Ministry of Finance is very well aware of the global standards that are there, but I think it's important in the discussions of which we've had in the Ministry of Finance around this is recognizing, as I said, that the global standard setting bodies have realized that the policies that were put in place to reduce financial crime are increasing broadly, in some ways unintended, on reducing financial access. So the global standard settings bodies are adjusting their approach, but it's important that as representatives of individuals who do not have access to banking services, which of course would subject them to even more expensive things or other risks, we need to make sure that we act in this way. And it's something that the banks are aware of, that we're moving forward. It is not new, and the consultation has been taking place throughout this year.
Understood. Moving on to the corporate income tax. So that's being handled by a specific commission. I guess, but at this stage, you said, it was said in the throne speech that over the next 10 years, the government should be able to eliminate Bermuda's $3.3 billion debt. That seems, I guess, to some, a bit too good to be true. Is it realistic in terms of your estimates? I think it was $750 million annually could be raised.
Well, if the estimates are $750 million annually, and you take that over 10 years, that would be $7.5 billion. So it is clearly well within reach. But I don't think that's the particular focus. I think the fact is that we will see what happens. We know where the estimates that were put out in last year's budget, those matters may be revised, and there may be updated figures that will come in this year's budget. But I think the most important provision to focus on as part of that language was around the legislation that we're actually going to put in place this year. As a throne speech is a legislative plan and a legislative agenda. And one of the things we will do is to clarify the tax reserve fund, which is how these particular funds are going to put into reserve so that they can be used for the benefit of future generations, whether it's debt retirement, whether it is the creation of a sovereign wealth fund. But these are all the recommendations that have come from the various teams who have been looking at this, talking about the fact that the government must make sure we put in place very sound measures to govern how excess revenues may be able to be handled. And so from that perspective, we're expecting, as the corporate income tax is going to be taking place in January 1st, and as collections will start to come in over the next few years, that we have a legislative structure in place. And that's why I always harken back to the fact that the throne speech is a legislative plan for the year, and talking about the legislation that is going to be brought to Parliament for legislators to consider, to debate, and to hopefully pass into law.
Thank you. And just lastly, Fairmount Southampton, groundbreaking tomorrow morning, which must be quite an exciting time for the government. I guess, can you elaborate how important this structure will be in terms of Bermuda's overall economy? It's tied to airlift and other job creation opportunities. And has your attention turned to Elbow in terms of development?
So let's start with Fairmont, Southampton. Yes, tomorrow will be a groundbreaking. Yes, it'll be exciting. I received a message from a constituent this morning that said their first day of work at Fairmont, Southampton is today, and this is someone who was seeking employment. So it was certainly a bright start to my particular day. But if I would like to, refer to a passage from the throne speech, which I think is very appropriate, and it was from Nelson Mandela. And it says, after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. And so I think that is appropriate. The work doesn't stop because this is moving forward. Yes, attention has to turn to other particular tourism and investment projects that are happening throughout. But I think it is a demonstration of patience, a demonstration of tenacity, and a demonstration to get the desire to make sure that we achieve a fair result for the people of Bermuda. So there are going to be meetings working on that site. It is going to mean a reopening and a boost to airlift when it comes open. We already know that the Waterlot Inn is accepting reservations because work was continuing during this particular point in time. And so, yes, it is exciting, but there is clearly more work to be done. And the government, as the Minister of Youth, Social Development and Seniors said, is not resting on our laurels. We recognize that there is continued work to be done, and we're continuing to press ahead. That is the reason why we've laid out a very ambitious legislative agenda, because we've always had ambitious legislative agendas to get a lot of things done through the legislature.
Thank you, Premier. There's a lot on here, but I would like to turn my attention to Minister Furbert, if that's okay. So it was also announced the domestic violence court program would be introduced. This is something the Centre Against Abuse has been calling for about a decade, and everyone's pretty excited for it. But I guess in terms of victims who often or sometimes try to withdraw their statements made to police under pressure by the perpetrator, will there be legal or other protections in place as part of this program to address that particular issue?
First, let me mention that the domestic violence court will fall under the Ministry of Justice. But I cannot say that I'm more than elated being part of the Morocco team being under the Ministry of Youth, Social Development and Seniors, having this to progress. The Attorney General has also said that there are provisions already in place that addresses the prosecution being able to move forward with domestic violence incidents if persons pull back their complaints or statements. But that does not mean that there is not room to continue to strengthen our domestic violence legislation, which is something that we are continuing to keep a pulse on and looking forward to progress at. But this is huge. Domestic violence court is huge, and I believe the DPP's office is also very encouraged by this news as well.
Thank you. So advancements to the Disabilities Act, you said that there would be increased access to services, facilities, and employment. Do you have in mind at this stage what would be your priority in terms of services that are needed at this time?
Sure. So this is a big area and will impact many. But I'll give you an example so that we understand. So right now I'm able to communicate with you and speak with you. You're able to hear me. If there was someone who had a hearing impairment and they wanted to come to this press conference conference and they wanted to share what their accommodation or modification may be, that would mean that we would have to provide an interpreter so that they can also participate in this press conference. So it's modifications like that wouldn't necessarily cause undue hardship, but we need to make sure that goods, services are accessible for persons with disabilities in Bermuda. So that's a small example. That's one example, but there are many examples. But I just wanted to be able to break it down for the community in regard to what that could potentially look like. Please also bear in mind that people who experience or are living with disabilities, it's unique. It can be pretty specific. And so we don't want to be left guessing what those accommodations or modifications are. And it's also important that we address through legislation that they share that information so that we can make opportunities for accessibility, for modification, for accommodation wide open so that our community also understands what that means.
Thank you. And
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Siku, I believe you have some queries as it relates to today's press briefing. Siku from the Royal Senate.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ministers. Most of my questions really are just aimed at the Premier himself. Firstly, you mentioned that what would essentially be an anti-monopoly act, really, to stop businesses from essentially cornering the market. Do you know if there are any businesses that kind of already cross over this monopoly threshold? And if there are, will there be any, for lack of better words, consequences that the government has in mind to kind of address this situation?
Oh, I will just say this, that you use the term anti-monopoly act. That is not something that is the terminology. I think what is important to note is that what we stated inside of the throne speech is the reality. The reality is that the government has no power to act. There is none. And so people will say, well, in other countries they can do this. The government has no legislative power. The reason that jurisdictions in other spaces can act is because the government has been given that power in the legislatures of their particular countries. And it is something that is important. But what we did say is that we are going to consult on what is the best way forward around this and put matters into place so that a government can have the power to act if it is deemed in the public interest to do so, which is the test which is used in many other jurisdictions around the world. And I think it's just important to note that you cannot have a fair economy if consumers do not have choice and there is a reduction of competition that could increase prices. And so from that perspective, that is what we're looking at. The government cannot enforce fairness if the government does not have the tools to do so. So it is certainly something that we're looking at. Some people may think of recent examples, but there's also been complaints that have come to the government about, insurance companies buying healthcare practices, those healthcare practices going to businesses saying that you have to use this particular person or that particular person for these particular benefits, which may or not work. And so these are all things that, yes, have come to the government, that, yes, may be something that we may want to scrutinize to say, this is probably not in the best interest of consumers. How can we do these things better and more different? But if the government does not have the legislative tools, then we are effectively powerless to do that. And so it is important that we put in place the legislative tools so that we can act in that way. Those tools do exist for the space under the regulatory authority. So for energy and telecommunications and fuels, there is the space to the power. So if there are going to be merged in those sectors, then under law, those persons already say that's going to concentrate market power, or that's going to be an issue when it comes to pricing, et cetera. And the regulatory authority has the power underneath those sectors. But for a wider variety of sectors, there is not that power. And we want to make sure that we provide the government with the tools to act in the public interest if, under the law and after review, it is deemed necessary to do so.
Mm-hmm. I see. And with regards to the financial literacy, when is the government hoping to, I know it's, again, very much in the early stages, but does the government perhaps have a time frame of when this of not only when this could be rolled out, but also how this will be reached out to the public?
Absolutely. I mean, we're not doing it starting from scratch. A lot of the work in which we do regionally and other things, as I had mentioned in my remarks, this is something similar that has already taken place in Barbados, and we're following on the model of which they've done insofar as a financial literacy survey, which was very effective, which the Ministry of Finance has reviewed and looking to make certain tweaks so that we can go ahead and put that out to actually understand the level of financial literacy that does exist in the community. The governor of Barbados did something very creative. They had a sweepstakes, so people who did respond to these things did actually get a benefit to encourage persons to respond around this so we can actually have an understanding of financial literacy. But I think what's also important is speaking about the initiatives and education themselves of which we plan to do. And it's not just the government. So part of the review of the pension fees, et cetera, one of the things which came to us from pension administrators is they want to partner with the government on financial literacy initiatives. And as the government seeks to make the private pension system to add more flexibility for possible investments of which people may be able to make with their private pensions, we need to make sure that persons are informed around what are the types of things that they need to do and or to look out for. And so I think it's something that is important on a broad level, but it will happen sooner rather than later, as we're not starting from scratch. We do need to adjust, but as I said, these are not things the first time that a government's done a financial literacy survey in the region. And so we'll take the learnings from some of our fellow CARICOM countries and then apply those to Bermuda.
I see. And when you say sooner rather than later, will that be within the next year, 2 years?
Oh,
years?
Absolutely within this legislative year. No question on that one.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much.
That's it?
Yep, that's everything.
All right. Nothing further? All right, great.
Thank you very much. You have a follow-up question, Jasmine, is that correct? Yes? That's fine. Is it for the Premier or for the Minister? Oh, come on up.
Just because the word CARICOM was mentioned. So you've had some questions floating about what Bermuda could stand to benefit from joining the regional body. Has anything progressed in terms of talks or discussions with what it will do for Bermuda should we join?
So there has not been any new update that has been issued from the government. As has been stated, the government is in awaiting receipt of information from CARICOM. As you can understand, though the CARICOM chair is visiting this year, we should also recognize that his country and other countries were devastated in a hurricane early this year. And so there's work that CARICOM has been engaged in on those particular matters. There have been preliminary meetings. We're waiting for the full round of meetings so that we can get the information so that we can conduct the promised public consultation around those issues. I know that many persons have questions on this. It is something that is a big initiative, but it is not something that is going to, if I may say, happen quickly and without consultation. So it's not all of a sudden we're going to wake up and Bermuda is a full member of CARICOM. There is a process to this, and we are going to carry out this process. So I know there may be political reasons why people continue to raise the particular issue, and I'm not going to go too deeply into that because we'll have plenty of time to debate and discuss. But we believe that there are benefits that can accrue to the country, but there's also things that we all have to consider. And so we'll wait for the consultation to happen, wait for that particular information. We understand the things which we want to achieve to examine whether or not that's possible inside the CARICOM structure, and we'll take it from there. No problem. All right.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Premier, do we have any final words as we wrap up today's press briefing?
The only final words of which I will say is to echo the words of the Minister of Youth, Social Development and Seniors, who made a very powerful closing to her statement today. To recognize that persons throughout the country, you are not forgotten. The government works every single day. Ministers of the government, MPs of the government, senators of the government continue to work to advance the agenda of fairness and inclusivity. As I go back to this statement, once you climb one hill, you find there's many more hills to climb. But I can assure you that the government has many more hiking boots ready to go, and we're going to continue to climb those hills to continue to make sure that we deliver a fair Bermuda for all Bermudians. Thank you, and thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Premier. Thank you very much, Minister, for your briefings today. Members of the media, that concludes today's press conference. Thank you for tuning in, members of the public. Thank you very much.